Sometimes you make one stupid decision that changes everything. For Elena Hartwell, that decision happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, when exhaustion made her desperate enough to buy something from a suspicious street vendor she'd never seen before. One small pill. One promise of the best sleep of her life. And when she woke up the next morning, everything had changed in the most impossible way imaginable. Because Elena didn't just wake up feeling different. She woke up as someone completely different. A boy. And not just any transformation either. This wasn't some temporary spell or illusion that would fade by lunchtime. This was real, physical, undeniable change. And the only person who could reverse it? An archmage. The kind of legendary magic user that most people only read about in history books. The kind that takes decades of brutal training, impossible talent, and more than a little luck to become. So, Elena had a choice. Live the rest of her life in the wrong body, or somehow achieve what even the most gifted magic users struggle their entire lives to accomplish. Easy, right? Let's start at the beginning, when Elena's life was complicated, but at least made sense. She was 19 years old, a student at Celestria University studying magical theory. Not actual magic, mind you. Her family didn't have the money or connections for that. Magical theory was what you studied when you were fascinated by magic but couldn't afford to actually learn it. You learned about the principles, the history, the applications. You just never got to cast a single spell yourself. And honestly, Elena had made peace with that. She loved her studies. She loved learning about the great mages of history, understanding how magical frameworks operated, analyzing the theoretical limits of different spell categories. She was good at it, too. Top of her class. Her professors loved her. She had a bright future ahead as a magical researcher or historian. Sure, there was always that little voice in the back of her mind, wondering what it would feel like to actually channel magic, to feel that raw power flowing through your veins. But that was just daydreaming. Elena was practical. She focused on what was possible, not on impossible wishes. Her days followed a comfortable routine. Morning classes on theoretical frameworks, afternoon sessions analyzing historical spell patterns, evenings in the library, surrounded by dusty tomes that smelled like ancient parchment and forgotten knowledge. She had her favorite study spot by the third-floor window, where the afternoon light hit perfectly. She had her group of friends who gathered every Thursday for study sessions that usually devolved into gossip and snacks. She had her favorite professor, Dr. Ashwood, who saw potential in her and sometimes stayed late to discuss complex magical theories. It was a good life. Maybe not the adventurous, magical life she'd dreamed about as a kid, but good nonetheless. Stable, predictable, safe. Then came that Tuesday. Elena had been up until 3 a.m, finishing a research paper on elemental convergence theory. She'd promised Professor Ashwood she'd have it ready by Wednesday, and she never missed deadlines. Never. But the price of that dedication was hitting her hard. When she dragged herself to her morning lecture on transmutation principles, she could barely keep her eyes open. The words blurred together. Her notes became increasingly illegible. By lunchtime, she felt like she was moving through thick fog. Her friend Marcus took one look at her and suggested she skip their afternoon study group. Get some rest, take care of herself for once. Elena agreed. She'd just go home, maybe take a quick nap, and feel better by evening. Simple plan. Except when she left campus and started the walk back to her tiny apartment, the exhaustion hit her even harder. Her legs felt heavy. Her head pounded. The late autumn air that usually energized her just made her eyes water. And that's when she saw the street vendor. He wasn't someone she recognized, which was odd in itself. Elena had lived in this neighborhood for 2 years. She knew all the regular vendors, the shop owners, the people who set up stalls in the market square. But this guy, never seen him before. He had a small cart set up in an alley she usually walked past, covered with various bottles and vials that glowed with faint, otherworldly light. Above his cart hung a hand-painted sign that read in flowery script, Madame Zephyra's Miraculous Remedies. The whole setup screamed tourist trap, the kind of place that sold colored water to gullible visitors and claimed it would cure everything from headaches to heartbreak. Elena would have walked right past. Should have walked right past. But the vendor called out to her. Madame Zephyra, apparently. Though up close, Elena wasn't entirely convinced this was actually a woman. The figure wore layers of colorful scarves and shawls that made it hard to tell much about them at all. Their voice was raspy and strange, neither distinctly masculine nor feminine. You look tired, child, they said, their eyes glittering with an unsettling intensity. So very tired. Elena tried to brush them off politely. She was fine, just a long night of studying. She needed to get home. But Madame Zephyra pressed on. I have something that will help. The most restful sleep you've ever experienced. Deep, dreamless, and restorative. You'll wake feeling like a new person. They held up a small glass vial filled with shimmering silver liquid. It caught the fading afternoon light and seemed to glow from within. Just one dose, tonight, before bed. I promise you'll never have slept better. Elena hesitated. This was obviously a scam. Some kind of placebo at best, possibly something dangerous at worst. She wasn't stupid enough to ingest random substances from street vendors. Except the vendor seemed to sense her skepticism, and their expression shifted to something almost hurt. You don't believe me. I understand. Everyone is so suspicious these days, but I'll tell you what. Take it for free, try it. If it works, come back and pay me what you think it's worth. If it doesn't, you've lost nothing but a few hours of sleep you were going to have anyway. And there it was. The hook that got her. Because if it was free, what did she have to lose? If it did nothing, fine, she'd sleep normally. If it somehow actually worked, well, then she'd come back and pay the vendor. Either way, no risk. Or so she thought. Elena took the vial. Madame Zephyra smiled, revealing teeth that seemed just slightly too white, too perfect. Remember, they said as Elena turned to leave, just one dose, the entire vial. Don't overthink it. Just drink it before bed and let the magic work. Magic. The word should have been a red flag, should have sent alarm bells ringing through Elena's exhausted brain. But she was so tired. So incredibly tired. And the vial was already in her pocket. She walked the rest of the way home in a daze, barely noticing the familiar streets, the neighbors she usually greeted, the sound of children playing in the park she passed. Her apartment felt like a sanctuary when she finally unlocked the door and stepped inside. Small, cramped, with perpetually flickering lights and a radiator that only worked when it felt like it. But it was hers. And right now, the old, slightly lumpy bed looked like heaven itself. Elena went through the motions of her evening routine on autopilot, changed into comfortable clothes, made a cup of tea that she was too tired to drink, set her alarm for the next morning. And then, standing in her tiny bathroom with the vial in her hand, she paused. One last moment of hesitation. This was insane, right? Drinking something from a random street vendor? But her reflection in the mirror showed the dark circles under her eyes, the exhausted slump of her shoulders. She needed sleep. Desperately. And what was the worst that could happen? So Elena unscrewed the cap, raised the vial to her lips, and drank. The liquid tasted like moonlight and starlight and winter frost all at once. It was cold going down, but not unpleasantly so. More like a refreshing stream on a hot day. She felt it settle in her stomach, spreading a gentle warmth through her body. Not uncomfortable, actually quite soothing. Maybe this would actually work. Maybe she'd get that promised restful sleep after all. Elena stumbled to her bed, suddenly overwhelmed with drowsiness. The last thing she remembered was her head hitting the pillow and thinking that yes, This was exactly what she needed. And then darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. No dreams, no awareness of time passing. Just an endless void of perfect, peaceful nothing. When consciousness started to creep back in, it came slowly, like swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. Elena became aware of light pressing against her closed eyelids, of the familiar sounds of her neighborhood waking up outside, of the uncomfortable way her blankets had twisted around her during the night. She felt rested. Actually, properly rested for the first time in weeks. The bone-deep exhaustion that had been her constant companion was gone. Her mind felt clear. Her body felt energized. That street vendor's potion had actually worked. Maybe she really would go back and pay them something. It was only fair. Elena stretched, enjoying the sensation of well-rested muscles. Time to start the day. She had that paper to turn in to Professor Ashwood, and then her hand came up to rub her eyes, and something felt wrong. Her hand felt larger, rougher. The proportions weren't quite right. Elena's eyes snapped open. She stared at her hand. That was definitely not her hand. Bigger, more angular, the fingers longer, the nails shorter and more squared off. More importantly, it was definitely, unmistakably, a male hand. For a long moment, Elena's brain simply refused to process what she was seeing. This had to be a dream. One of those weird, vivid dreams that sometimes happened when you were really tired. She'd wake up properly in a minute and everything would be normal. She pinched herself. Hard. Pain flared in her arm, sharp and very real. Not a dream. Elena sat up fast and immediately realized something was very, very wrong. Her whole body felt different. Heavier. The weight distribution was off. And when she looked down at herself, she saw a male chest where her modest curves should have been. A flat, defined male chest. Elena threw off the blankets and stumbled out of bed, her legs longer than they should be, her center of gravity completely alien. She crashed into her dresser, sending books and papers flying, and finally made it to the bathroom mirror. The face staring back at her was not her face. It was male. Young, probably around her age, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jawline. Dark hair that fell messily across the forehead. Eyes the same unusual amber color as hers had always been, but somehow different in this masculine face. Broader shoulders, taller frame, everything about the reflection was wrong. Elena backed away from the mirror, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. This was impossible. This didn't happen. You didn't just wake up as a completely different person. This wasn't how the world worked. Magic existed, sure. But transformation magic was incredibly advanced. The kind of thing only master mages could accomplish. And even then, it required complex ritual circles, expensive components, and hours of preparation. You didn't just accidentally stumble into a complete physical transformation. Unless that potion. Elena's hand went to her stomach, remembering the strange taste, the cold liquid, the way it had spread through her body. That hadn't been a sleep aid. That had been some kind of transformation potion. A powerful one. Maybe the most powerful she'd ever heard of. But why? Why would someone hand out something like that for free? What possible reason could that street vendor have had for turning her into a boy? The panic that had been building in Elena's chest exploded into full-blown terror. She grabbed the edge of the sink to steady herself, feeling the strange new muscles in her arms respond to the motion. Her reflection showed someone on the verge of hyperventilating. Someone whose entire reality had just shattered. She needed to fix this. Right now, immediately. Elena stumbled back to her bedroom, searching for her clothes. But of course her clothes didn't fit anymore. Nothing fit. The body she was in was several inches taller and considerably broader than her original form. She ended up in an oversized sweater and loose pants that at least stayed up, looking ridiculous but not caring. She had to get back to that alley. Find that vendor. Demand they reverse whatever they'd done. This was insane. This was illegal. You couldn't just go around transforming people without their consent. There had to be laws against this. Magical regulations. Something. Elena grabbed her bag and headed for the door, only to freeze when she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. Even in the terrible lighting, even in clothes that didn't fit, she looked like a completely different person. Not just male, but attractive, in a sharp, dangerous kind of way. The kind of face that would make people look twice. The kind of face that definitely wasn't hers. This wasn't just a transformation. This was a complete reconstruction. A different person in every physical way. And yet somehow, impossibly, she could feel that it was still her inside. Her thoughts. Her memories. Her mind unchanged even as everything else had been altered beyond recognition. Elena forced herself to move. Questions could come later. Right now, she needed to find that vendor and get her body back. The streets outside were busy with morning traffic. People hurrying to work and school. Vendors setting up their stalls for the day. Elena pushed through the crowds, her new height making it easier to see over people's heads, searching desperately for that colorful cart with its glowing bottles. But the alley where she'd met Madame Zephyra was empty. Completely empty. No cart, no vendor, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Elena searched the surrounding streets, increasingly frantic. Maybe they'd moved to a different spot. Maybe they set up somewhere else in the mornings, but there was nothing. It was like Madame Zephyra had never existed. After an hour of searching, Elena finally had to admit defeat. The vendor was gone, which meant she was stuck like this, at least temporarily, until she could figure out what to do. She found herself wandering, not ready to go back to her apartment, not sure where else to go. Her feet carried her to Celestria University almost on autopilot. The familiar campus grounds usually brought her comfort, but today everything felt wrong. She didn't belong here anymore. How could she possibly attend her classes looking like this? But as she stood at the edge of campus, watching students stream past, an idea began to form. A crazy, desperate, probably impossible idea. But maybe the only option she had. If she wanted to reverse a magical transformation this powerful, she'd need access to advanced magical knowledge. Real magical knowledge, not just the theoretical stuff she'd been studying. She'd need to understand transformation magic at its deepest levels, and there was only one place where that kind of education existed. Thornhaven Academy. The most prestigious magical school in the entire kingdom, where the children of noble families and the magically gifted learned to become true mages, where the curriculum included everything from basic spell casting to advanced transmutation theory, where, if she worked hard enough and learned fast enough, she might actually figure out how to reverse what had been done to her. But there were a few small problems with that plan. First, Elena wasn't magically gifted. She'd been tested as a child like everyone else, and the results had been clear. No magical ability, 0. Which was why she'd ended up studying magical theory instead of magic itself. Second, Thornhaven was expensive. Prohibitively expensive. The kind of place where annual tuition cost more than most people earned in 5 years. Her family couldn't afford it. She certainly couldn't afford it. Third, and perhaps most importantly, she had no idea how to even get in. Thornhaven didn't exactly hand out acceptance letters to random people off the street. But as Elena stood there, watching the university students go about their normal days, something shifted inside her. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the strange new body giving her unfamiliar confidence. Maybe it was just the realization that she had nothing left to lose. She'd already lost everything that mattered. Her body, her identity, her normal life. If she didn't do something drastic, she'd be stuck as a stranger forever. so she'd figure it out. Somehow. She'd find a way into Thornhaven Academy. She'd learn everything they had to teach about transformation magic, and she'd get her body back, no matter what it took. The decision brought a strange kind of calm. Elena had always been good at making plans, at breaking down impossible problems into manageable steps. This was just another problem to solve. A uniquely bizarre and magically complicated problem, sure, but still just a problem. Step 1 would be figuring out if this new body had any magical ability, because if it didn't, Thornhaven was impossible. You couldn't attend a magic school if you couldn't cast magic. That was just basic logic. Elena needed to test herself somehow. She headed to the university library, slipping in through a side entrance she'd used countless times. The building felt different at this height, the familiar spaces rearranged by her new perspective. She made her way to the restricted section where they kept books on practical magic. Not that she'd ever been allowed to check any out before, but she could at least look. Elena pulled a basic primer on magical ability from the shelf. It outlined simple tests that anyone could perform to check for latent magical talent. Most children took these tests around age 5 or 6. The results were usually clear. Either you had the spark or you didn't. But transformation magic was strange. It rewrote the body on a fundamental level. Maybe, just maybe, this new body had different capabilities than her old one. The first test was straightforward. Place your hand over a clear glass of water and try to will it to ripple. Nothing complex. Just the most basic expression of magical intent. The glass that Elena had brought from the library's reading room sat on the table in front of her. She placed her hand above it, palm down, and focused. Felt for something, anything, that might indicate magical ability. At first, nothing happened. The water remained perfectly still. Elena's heart sank. Of course it wouldn't work. Why would it? Magic didn't just appear from nowhere. But then, as she was about to give up, she felt something. A tingle in her fingertips. A warmth spreading through her palm. And the water began to move. Just slightly. Tiny ripples spreading from the center of the glass, growing stronger. Elena stared, hardly daring to breathe. This was impossible. She'd been tested. Multiple times. The results had always been the same. No magical ability. Zero capacity. But the water was definitely moving now, responding to something she was doing even if she couldn't quite explain what that something was. The ripples grew more pronounced, the water beginning to slosh gently against the sides of the glass. Elena pulled her hand back, and the movement stopped immediately. She tried again. Same result. The water responded to her intent, to her will. This body was magical. Somehow, impossibly, the transformation hadn't just changed her physically. It had given her access to magic itself. Elena's mind raced. This changed everything. If she had magical ability, then Thornhaven wasn't just a desperate fantasy. It was actually possible. She could actually attend. She could actually learn. But that brought up a whole new set of problems. First, she'd need money. Lots of money. Even with magical ability, Thornhaven's tuition wasn't cheap. Second, she'd need to pass their entrance exams, which were notoriously difficult. Third, and perhaps most complicated, she'd need an identity. Thornhaven didn't just let random strangers enroll. You needed documentation, a history, a believable story about who you were and where you came from. Elena sat back in her chair, her mind working through the challenges. The money problem seemed insurmountable at first glance, but then she remembered something. Thornhaven offered scholarships, full rides for students who showed exceptional promise. If she could somehow prove her magical ability was strong enough, if she could convince them she was worth investing in, maybe she could get in without paying a single coin. The entrance exam happened twice a year. Once in spring, once in fall. The fall exam was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare. To practice using magic she'd barely discovered existed. To master enough control that she could pass tests designed for students who'd been training since childhood. It should have been impossible. Would have been impossible for the old Elena. But the old Elena was gone. Literally, physically gone. And whoever she was now, whatever this transformation had made her, she had to try. The identity problem was trickier. She couldn't use her real name, couldn't risk someone recognizing her, connecting the mysteriously vanished Elena Hartwell with this new male student. She needed a new name, a new backstory, a completely constructed identity that would hold up under scrutiny. Elena spent the rest of the day in the library, researching, planning, practicing the small magical exercises from the primer. The water test became easier with each attempt. She moved on to other basics, making a candle flame flicker, causing a feather to levitate slightly. Nothing impressive, but proof that the ability was there, waiting to be developed. As evening fell and the library began to empty out, Elena finally headed back to her apartment. Her mind buzzed with plans and possibilities, and the sheer overwhelming reality of what she was attempting. She'd need a new name, something that sounded noble enough to fit Thornhaven's typical student body, but not so grand that it would draw unwanted attention. Elian. She'd call herself Elian. It was close enough to her real name that she might actually respond to it naturally, but different enough to provide separation. Elian Blackthorn. Because she needed a surname too, and Blackthorn sounded appropriately dramatic for a mysterious new student with unknown origins. Her backstory would be simple. Orphan from a minor noble family. Parents killed in a magical accident when she was young. Raised by distant relatives who didn't much care what she did. Recently discovered magical ability. Looking for proper training. It wasn't creative, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to be plausible and difficult to verify. For the next 3 weeks, Elena threw herself into preparation with single-minded intensity. Every spare moment was spent practicing magic, reading everything she could find about Thornhaven's entrance exams, preparing for the impossible task ahead. She quickly discovered that having magical ability and knowing how to use it were two very different things. The basic exercises from the primer came relatively easily. But anything more complex? That was where her lack of training showed painfully. She could make water move, but she couldn't shape it with precision. She could create a spark of fire, but she couldn't control it. She could levitate small objects, but they wobbled dangerously. Everything felt clumsy and unpracticed, like trying to write with her non-dominant hand. The magic was there, but the finesse wasn't. Still, she improved. Slowly but steadily. Each day brought slightly better control, slightly more power, slightly more understanding of how to channel magical energy through her body and into the world. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to compete with students who'd been training for years. But it was something. And something was better than nothing. Elena also dealt with the practical challenges of her new existence. She couldn't keep living in her apartment under her old name. Couldn't pay rent as Elena Hartwell when Elena Hartwell had apparently disappeared. She withdrew all the money from her bank account in cash, closed everything she could, and found a cheap boarding house on the other side of the city. A place where they didn't ask too many questions as long as you paid on time. She told the landlord her name was Elian, recently arrived in the city, looking for work. They didn't seem to care. Elena's friends from university started looking for her. She saw Marcus putting up missing person notices with her photo, saw messages piling up on the communication crystal she no longer checked. It hurt more than she'd expected, leaving her old life behind without explanation, letting people worry about her. But what choice did she have? How could she possibly explain? She couldn't tell anyone the truth. Couldn't risk word getting out about what had happened. The magical community would want to study her, to understand how such a powerful transformation had been performed. she'd become a curiosity, a specimen, and any chance of fixing things on her terms would disappear. So she ghosted everyone, disappeared completely, became Elian Blackthorn, and tried to forget that Elena Hartwell had ever existed. The hardest part was seeing her reflection. Every morning, Elena looked in the mirror and saw a stranger looking back. A handsome stranger, admittedly. The transformation had been thorough and, in its own way, kind. But still a stranger. She tried not to think about it too much. Tried to focus on the goal. Learn transformation magic. Reverse the spell. Get her body back. That was all that mattered. The day of Thornhaven's entrance exam arrived with terrifying speed. Elena, dressed in the best clothes she could afford, stood outside the academy's main gates with hundreds of other hopeful students. Most of them looked confident, excited. These were kids who'd been preparing for this moment their entire lives, who came from families with magical legacies stretching back generations, who'd had private tutors and expensive education. Elena felt like an imposter, which, to be fair, she absolutely was. But she'd come this far. She wasn't backing out now. The gates swung open at precisely 9 a.m, and the crowd surged forward. Elena moved with them, her heart pounding. Thornhaven Academy was even more impressive up close. Towering spires of crystalline stone that seemed to glow with internal light. Gardens that defied the season, blooming with flowers that shouldn't exist. The air itself felt charged with magic, making her skin tingle. This was it. This was where she'd either succeed or fail. Where she'd either start down the path to recovering her body or lose her chance forever. Elena took a deep breath and stepped through the gates. Whatever happened next, at least she was trying. At least she wasn't giving up. Inside the academy grounds, officials directed the applicants to a massive courtyard where the first round of testing would take place. There were so many people. Hundreds, maybe close to 1,000, all competing for roughly 50 available spots. The odds were brutal. A tall woman in elegant robes stepped onto a raised platform and called for attention. Her voice carried across the entire courtyard without seeming to raise in volume. Magic, obviously. "Welcome to Thornhaven Academy," she announced. "I am Headmistress Sylvain. You are here because you believe you have what it takes to become a mage. Most of you are wrong." There was nervous laughter from the crowd. Headmistress Sylvain didn't smile. "Our entrance exam consists of 3 parts. The first tests raw magical ability. If you cannot demonstrate sufficient power, you will be dismissed immediately. The second tests control and precision. Power without control is useless at best, dangerous at worst. The third tests creativity and problem solving. We're not looking for students who can memorize spells. We're looking for students who can think." She gestured to the courtyard, where elaborate testing stations had been set up. "You will be divided into groups of 10. Each group will rotate through the stations. Your performance will be observed and evaluated. Those who pass all 3 parts will advance to the final interview. Good luck. You'll need it." The applicants were quickly sorted into groups. Elena found herself with 9 others, including a girl with silver hair, who introduced herself as Lyra and seemed far too cheerful for someone about to undergo a brutal examination. The first station tested raw power output. Simple enough in concept. Channel as much magical energy as you could into a crystal matrix, and see how brightly it glowed. Elena watched as the first few applicants in her group took their turns. Some managed a weak flicker. Some got a decent glow. One boy made the crystal shine so brightly that several people had to shield their eyes. Then it was Elena's turn. She approached the crystal, placed her hands on its surface, and focused. Drew on the magic that had been dormant her entire original life and active for barely 3 weeks. Pushed it through her palms into the crystalline structure. The crystal began to glow. Not as bright as Crystal Blazer Boy, but definitely respectable. a solid, steady light that held without wavering. She stepped back, and the examiner made a note on their clipboard. No comment, no indication whether she'd passed or failed. Just a note and a gesture to move to the next station. The second station was more complex. Applicants had to levitate a series of objects, each one slightly more difficult than the last. A feather, a book, a metal sphere, a crystal vase filled with water. The trick was that you had to keep all the previous objects floating while adding each new one. By the end, if you were good enough, you'd have 4 items hovering at different heights. Most people made it to 3 before losing control. Elena had practiced levitation obsessively. It was one of the few spells she felt somewhat confident about. She started with the feather, lifting it smoothly into the air. Added the book next, keeping the feather steady. The metal sphere was heavier, requiring more focus, but she managed it. 3 objects floating. The crystal vase was where it got brutal. It was heavy, the water inside making it unbalanced. Elena gritted her teeth and pushed. The vase rose slowly, wobbling dangerously. Water sloshed inside. One of the other floating objects, the book, started to dip. She adjusted, redistributing her focus. The book stabilized. The vase continued its ascent. For 10 long seconds, all 4 objects hung in the air. Then Elena's concentration broke. The vase fell. She caught it with a desperate burst of magic before it could shatter, but the spell ended. 3.5 objects. Not perfect, but better than most. The examiner made another note. The third station was the problem-solving test. Each applicant faced a unique magical puzzle. Elena's was a locked box surrounded by a shimmering barrier. She had to open the box without touching the barrier. Simple, right? Except the barrier reacted to any magical attempt to manipulate it directly. Trying to unlock the box with magic just made the barrier stronger. Elena studied the problem, her mind racing. This wasn't about power. It was about thinking differently. She couldn't affect the box directly. But what about indirectly? She focused on the ground beneath the box, using earth magic to slowly lift the soil. The box rose with it, still surrounded by its barrier, kept rising until it was waist height. Then Elena simply reached underneath and opened the latch from below. The barrier flickered and disappeared. The examiner actually smiled at that one, made a longer note on the clipboard, maybe even a positive one. By the end of the day, roughly half the applicants had been eliminated. Those who remained were called back for individual interviews the following morning. Elena returned to her boarding house feeling cautiously optimistic. She'd passed the practical tests. Now she just had to survive questioning from people who were almost certainly much smarter and more experienced than her. The interview was conducted by 3 professors in a small office that managed to feel both cramped and intimidating. They asked about her background, her family, her previous training. Elena stuck to her prepared story. Orphan, distant relatives, recently discovered magical ability. Self-taught through library books and practice. It sounded thin even to her own ears. But the professors didn't immediately call her a liar. Instead, they asked demonstration questions. Could she show them the water ripple technique? Yes. Could she create a sustained flame? Yes. Could she identify the type of magic being used in this enchanted object? That one she actually knew from her theoretical studies. Ambient absorption enchantment with a temporal delay component. One professor raised an eyebrow. Interesting answer. How did you come to that conclusion? Elena explained her reasoning, drawing on years of theoretical knowledge even if her practical experience was measured in weeks. The professors exchanged glances. Your theoretical foundation is unexpectedly strong, one of them said, but your practical skills are barely adequate. Why should we accept you? This was the moment Elena had been dreading. She took a breath. Because I'm desperate to learn. Because I'll work harder than anyone. Because magical theory without practice is frustrating, and I know I have a lot to learn. But I can learn it. I know I can. Not eloquent, not particularly impressive, but honest in a way that seemed to surprise them. Another exchange of glances. Then, we'll inform you of our decision by week's end. Elena spent the next 3 days in agony, unable to focus on anything. She'd done everything she could. Now it was just waiting. The letter arrived on the 4th day. Elena's hands shook as she opened it. Dear applicant Blackthorn, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into Thornhaven Academy's incoming class. Your scholarship has been approved, covering full tuition and basic living expenses. Term begins in 2 weeks. Orientation materials enclosed. Welcome to Thornhaven. Elena read the letter 3 times. 4, 5. Each time expecting the words to change, to reveal some cruel joke. But they didn't. She was in. She'd actually done it. Against all odds, despite having barely 3 weeks of magical training, despite being an imposter in every sense of the word, she'd gotten into the most prestigious magic academy in the kingdom. This was her chance. Her shot at learning everything she needed to reverse the transformation and get her life back. Elena allowed herself exactly 1 minute of celebration. Then she started planning. Because getting into Thornhaven was just the first step. Now came the hard part. Actually surviving there. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Elena used her small scholarship stipend to buy proper academy supplies. Spell components, writing materials, textbooks that made her previous university books look like children's primers. She practiced magic, every spare moment, trying to close the gap between her rudimentary skills and what she'd need to keep up with classmates who'd been training since childhood. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But it was all she had. Move-in day at Thornhaven was controlled chaos. Students arrived with trunks full of supplies, parents fussing over them, friends reuniting after summer break. Elena had none of that. She arrived alone with a single bag containing everything she owned in this new identity. No family to wave goodbye. No friends to promise to write. Just herself and the weight of the impossible task ahead. The academy assigned students to dormitories based on their entrance exam results. Top performers got the nice rooms in the newer buildings. Everyone else made do with what was left. Elena ended up in Westbrook Hall, an old stone building with a distinct smell of mildew and ancient magic. Her room was tiny. A bed, a desk, a wardrobe that looked like it might collapse if you put too much weight in it. But it had a window overlooking the practice yards, and the lock on the door worked, and that was honestly more than she'd expected. Elena's roommate arrived shortly after, a boy named Felix with an perpetually anxious expression and an armful of astronomy charts. He barely looked at Elena before launching into a nervous introduction. Felix Ashford, 3rd son of the Ashford merchant family. I know I'm not as talented as some people here. My entrance exam scores were just barely good enough. But I'm going to work really hard and prove that I deserve to be here, and please don't be one of those people who picks on the weak students because I've heard stories and I really don't want to spend my time here being terrorized. He said all of this in one breath. Elena blinked. Elian Blackthorn, I'm not going to terrorize you. Felix looked skeptical. That's what a terrorizer would say. Fair point, actually. How about this? Elena offered. We both focus on our studies and leave each other alone unless we need help with something. I can agree to those terms. Felix stuck out his hand. They shook on it, sealing what Elena hoped would be a peaceful coexistence. The rest of the day was dedicated to orientation. Academy officials herded the new students through endless presentations about rules, expectations, resources, and consequences. Don't use magic in the dormitories except in designated practice rooms. Don't enter restricted areas. Don't attempt spells above your skill level without supervision. Don't. The list of prohibited activities was longer than the list of allowed ones. They also covered the curriculum structure. First-year students took 5 core classes: magical theory, practical spellcasting, elemental studies, magical history, and physical conditioning. Yes, physical conditioning. Because apparently becoming a mage required being in good shape. Made sense, Elena supposed. Magic drew on the body's energy. A weak body meant weak magic. Classes started the next morning. Elena barely slept that night, alternating between excitement and terror. This was it, the beginning of her real education, her chance to learn what she needed. When her alarm went off at dawn, she dressed quickly in the academy uniform: dark pants, white shirt, deep blue robe with the Thornhaven crest, and headed to breakfast. The dining hall was an enormous space with high ceilings and long tables that could easily seat hundreds. Students clustered in obvious social groups: the wealthy nobles in expensive accessories, the scholarship kids trying to blend in, the prodigies who everyone recognized from their entrance exam performances. Elena grabbed food and found an empty corner. She was halfway through eating when someone sat down across from her. Lyra, the silver-haired girl from her entrance exam group. Elian Blackthorn, right? I remember you from the exam. That trick with the box was clever. Thanks. You're Lyra? Lyra Nightwind. Yes, I know. Very dramatic surname. My parents were theater performers before they discovered they had magical talent. They passed the dramatic gene along. Lyra grinned. So what's your deal? You're obviously hiding something. Elena nearly choked on her toast. What? Oh, come on. Your entrance exam scores were weird. Strong theoretical knowledge but weak practical skills. Your backstory is obviously fake. I checked. There's no noble family named Blackthorn in any registry. And you have this look like you're constantly calculating something. So, what's your deal? Elena considered her options. Deny everything. Make up another lie. Or maybe carefully, tell a version of the truth. I need to learn transformation magic. Advanced transformation magic. That's why I'm here. Lyra tilted her head. Transformation magic? Interesting specialty? Planning to become a shapeshifter? Open a disguise business? Something like that. Not the full truth, but not a complete lie either. Well, good luck with that. Transformation magic is notoriously difficult. But hey, if you need a study partner who won't ask too many invasive questions, I'm available. I find mysterious loners entertaining. Lyra stood up, grabbing her tray. Think about it. First class starts in 20 minutes. Don't be late. Professors here are brutal about tardiness. She left, and Elena sat there processing the conversation. Had she just been found out? Or had she accidentally made a friend? Time would tell. The first class was magical theory with Professor Aldrich, a stern older man who immediately launched into a lecture on the fundamental principles of magical energy manipulation, without bothering with introductions or pleasantries. Elena took notes frantically, trying to absorb everything. This was different from her university studies. Less historical, more practical. Less about what magic had done, more about how magic worked at its core. The second class was practical spellcasting with Professor Varon, a younger teacher with an easy smile that disappeared the moment actual instruction began. Magic is about intent, energy, and control. Intent shapes what you want to happen. Energy provides the power to make it happen. Control ensures it happens the way you intended. Most students struggle with control. We'll fix that. She divided the class into pairs and assigned a simple exercise. Create a sphere of light between your hands and pass it to your partner. The sphere had to maintain its shape and brightness during the transfer. Elena was paired with a boy named Marcus, not her Marcus from university. This was a different Marcus, taller and more arrogant looking. He created his light sphere effortlessly, a perfect glowing orb that he passed to Elena with smug ease. Elena tried to match it. Her sphere was lopsided and flickered uncertainly. She passed it back. It dimmed halfway. Marcus rolled his eyes. You're supposed to be focusing on the energy transfer. Keep your intent steady. I'm trying. Try harder. This was going to be a long semester. The day continued with elemental studies, where Professor Thorn demonstrated various ways to channel magic through elemental focuses and physical conditioning, which turned out to be exactly as brutal as it sounded. Professor Caney, a woman who looked like she could bend steel bars with her bare hands, led them through exercises that left Elena's new body aching. "Magic comes from the body," Caney barked as students struggled through push-ups. "A weak body means weak magic. You want to be powerful? Build your strength. Build your endurance. Your body is your most important tool. Treat it accordingly." By the time Elena collapsed into bed that night, every muscle hurt, and her brain felt stuffed with information. Felix was already asleep, snoring softly in his corner of the room. Elena stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. She'd survived day 1. That was something. Only a few hundred more days to go, weeks blended together in an exhausting routine. Classes from dawn until late afternoon. Study sessions in the library until the staff kicked her out. Practice in the designated training rooms whenever she could find one empty. Sleep in stolen moments that never felt long enough. The other students started to form the usual social hierarchies. The talented elite who breezed through lessons. The hard workers who struggled but persevered. The ones who were clearly only there because of family connections and had no real aptitude. Elena tried to stay under the radar, competent enough not to be singled out as weak, but not so impressive that people paid too much attention. It was a difficult balance, because despite her best efforts, she was improving. Fast. The magical ability that had been dormant her entire original life responded eagerly to proper training. Spells that had seemed impossible at first became manageable, then easy, then almost automatic. She started to understand the flow of magic through her body, how to channel it, how to shape it, how to make it respond to her will. Professor Aldrich noticed, called her aside after class one day. "Blackthorn, your progress is unusual." Elena's heart sank. "Sir?" "Most students improve gradually. Steady growth over time. You're improving in leaps and bounds. Your practical skills are finally catching up to your theoretical knowledge. How?" "Extra practice, sir. I use the training rooms whenever they're available." Aldrich studied her with unsettling intensity. "You're older than most first years. 20? 21? 19, sir." A lie, but not by much. Elena was 19. Had been 19 when the transformation happened. Recently discovered magical ability? Yes, sir. Interesting. Very unusual for magical talent to manifest that late, but not unheard of. Keep up the good work, Blackthorn. You have potential. Don't waste it. He dismissed her, and Elena breathed again. Potential. She had potential. Coming from Aldrich, known for his harsh critiques, that was high praise. But it also meant she was being watched. She'd have to be more careful. The semester progressed. Elena learned more in those few months than she'd learned in years at university. Real magic. Practical applications. The kind of knowledge that had been theoretical concepts before suddenly becoming concrete reality. She learned to conjure fire that actually burned, to manipulate water with precision, to sense magical currents in the air around her, to identify spell signatures, to break simple enchantments, to create basic protective wards. It was intoxicating, like a whole new world had opened up that she'd only ever glimpsed through a keyhole before. And through it all, she kept her real goal in focus. Transformation magic. She couldn't take specialized classes yet. Those were for advanced students. But she studied everything she could find in the library. Read research papers late into the night. Tried to understand the theoretical principles behind the transformation that had been done to her. And slowly, painfully slowly, a picture began to emerge. The transformation wasn't just a spell, it was a curse. A specific type of magical working that bound itself to the target's magical core and resisted simple dispelling. Curses like this required specific conditions to break. Usually something symbolic. Sometimes something nearly impossible. Elena found references to similar transformations in old texts. Most of them had conditions like true love's kiss, or defeating a worthy opponent, or other fairy tale nonsense. But some mentioned specific magical thresholds, achieving a certain level of power, mastering particular types of magic. One text mentioned a case from 200 years ago where someone cursed to take animal form could only break the spell by becoming a recognized master of their craft, by proving themselves at the highest possible level. Could that be it? Was that why Madame Zephyra had transformed her? To force her to achieve something? To push her to become more than she was? It seemed needlessly elaborate. But then, powerful magical users were known for being dramatic. Elena focused on transformation magic with renewed intensity. Whenever professors mentioned anything even tangentially related, she paid extra attention, took detailed notes, asked questions. Professor Varon noticed. "Blackthorn, you seem particularly interested in transformation theory." "It fascinates me, Professor." "Have you considered specializing in it?" "I'd like to, eventually." Varon smiled. "Good. We could use more transformation specialists. Most students find it too difficult. But if you're serious, I can recommend some supplementary texts. Advanced material. Probably above your current level, but if you're determined." "I am, Professor. Very determined." Varon provided a reading list that made Elena's previous assignments look like light reading. Dense theoretical texts. Research papers filled with complex formulae. Case studies of transformation gone wrong. Elena devoured all of it. Months passed. The semester ended and a new one began. Elena's skills continued to improve. She wasn't the top of her class. That honor belonged to a frighteningly talented boy named Derek, who could cast spells most professors struggled with. But she was solidly in the upper tier. Respected by her peers, even if they didn't really know her. Felix turned out to be less anxious once he got comfortable. He was actually quite funny in a deadpan, self-deprecating way. They studied together sometimes, helping each other through difficult assignments. Lyra became something close to a friend. She never pushed for more details about Elena's background, but she always seemed to know when Elena needed someone to talk to, or when she needed to be left alone. The academy hosted a tournament at the end of the first year. All students competed in various magical challenges. Not mandatory, but strongly encouraged. Elena debated skipping it. She didn't need the attention. But competing would give her a chance to test her skills against others, to see how far she'd come. She entered. The tournament was structured in rounds. Each round featured different types of challenges: dueling, spell precision, magical problem solving. Elena advanced steadily through the first few rounds, not dominating, not struggling, just performing competently and moving forward. Then, in the quarterfinals, she faced Derek. The prodigy, the student everyone expected to win the entire tournament. The duel chamber was packed with spectators. Professor Caney explained the rules. Standard dueling procedures. No lethal spells. First to land 3 solid hits wins. Protective barriers would prevent actual injury. Begin. Derek came at her fast, launching a barrage of force bolts that Elena barely managed to deflect. He was good. Really good. Better than her in raw power. But Elena had something he didn't. Experience with desperation. She'd spent the last year fighting to keep up. Fighting to learn. Fighting to maintain her disguise. She knew how to struggle. Derek expected an easy victory. Elena denied him that. She used every trick she'd learned. Misdirection, feints, defensive spells that absorbed his attacks. And slowly, carefully, she started to turn the tide. Her first solid hit landed when Derek overcommitted to an attack. Elena dodged and caught him with a stunning bolt before he could recover. 1-0. The crowd murmured. Derek's expression hardened. The next exchange was brutal. Derek stopped playing around and showed why everyone thought he was unstoppable. But Elena held her ground. Defended when she needed to. Attacked when opportunities appeared. Her second hit came from a risky gambit. She created an illusion. A crude one, barely convincing. But in the chaos of combat, it was enough to make Derek hesitate for a split second. Elena's spell caught him square. 2-0. The crowd was roaring now. Nobody had expected this. Derek was supposed to win. He was the favorite, the prodigy, and some unknown scholarship student was beating him. The final exchange seemed to last forever. Derek threw everything he had at her. Elena gave ground, step by step, her defenses barely holding. Then, in a moment of clarity, she saw her opening. Derek's shield had a weakness. A gap in the upper right quadrant caused by the way he channeled his energy. Elena had been watching for it, waiting for it. She took the opening. Her spell penetrated his defenses and struck home. 3-0. Victory. The chamber erupted. Students were on their feet. Professors looked impressed. Derek stood there, clearly shocked, before finally offering his hand. Good match. You're better than your reputation suggests. Thanks. You're as good as everyone says. They shook. Derek left the chamber with grace, and Elena was suddenly surrounded by people congratulating her, asking her name, wanting to know where she'd learned to duel like that. It was exactly the kind of attention she'd been trying to avoid, but there was no escaping it now. The semi-finals and finals were anticlimactic after that. Elena lost in the finals to a fourth-year student who'd been competing for years. But second place in her first year was still remarkable. Enough to cement her reputation. Enough to catch the attention of Academy leadership. Headmistress Sylvain herself summoned Elena to her office the week after the tournament. The headmistress's office was everything Elena imagined, and more. Books lining every wall. Magical artifacts on display. A window that showed different views depending on the time of day, currently displaying a sunset over mountains that were nowhere near the Academy. Blackthorn, Sylvain gestured to a chair. Sit. Elena sat, tried not to look as nervous as she felt. You've had an interesting first year. Excellent. Theoretical scores. Rapid practical improvement. Second place in the tournament. Your professors speak highly of your work ethic. Thank you, headmistress. I'm told you're interested in specializing in transformation magic. Yes, headmistress. Very interested. Sylvain studied her with eyes that seemed to see far too much. Transformation magic is difficult. Most students who attempt it fail. Those who succeed rarely become more than competent. True masters of transformation are vanishingly rare. Why do you want to pursue it? Elena chose her words carefully. I believe transformation magic is undervalued. Most people see it as novelty, disguises, tricks. But at its core, transformation magic is about understanding the fundamental nature of physical form, how bodies work, how they can be changed. The principles behind it apply to so many other areas of magic. Sylvain nodded slowly. An astute observation. You're correct that most people underestimate transformation magic. Very well, Blackthorn. Starting next semester, you'll have access to advanced transformation courses. Use the opportunity wisely. Elena left the office feeling like she'd just passed another test she hadn't known she was taking. Advanced courses meant specialized instruction. It meant getting closer to her goal. It meant maybe, possibly, finding a way to reverse the curse. Summer break approached. Most students went home to their families. Elena had nowhere to go. The academy allowed her to stay, working in the library in exchange for room and board. She spent the quiet summer months diving even deeper into transformation research, found texts that hadn't been checked out in decades, discovered research from mages long dead who'd pushed the boundaries of what transformation magic could accomplish. And she found references to curse breaking, specific methodologies for undoing transformations that were meant to be permanent. It was complex, required enormous magical power, and most importantly, required understanding the exact nature of the original curse. Elena would need to reconstruct what had been done to her, identify every layer of the spell, find the anchor point where it connected to her magical core. Only then could she begin to dismantle it. It would take years, maybe more than years, but it was possible. Actually, genuinely possible. For the first time since that morning when she woke up changed, Elena felt real hope. Second year began with new challenges. The advanced transformation course was taught by Professor Kane, who apparently had expertise in more than just beating students into physical shape. Transformation magic is about willpower, Kane explained on the first day. You're literally forcing reality to accept a different shape. The universe doesn't like that. It resists. You have to be stronger than reality itself. That takes mental discipline, physical strength, and magical power in equal measure. The exercises were brutal. Transforming objects was one thing. Transforming living creatures? That was orders of magnitude harder. They started with plants, convinced a flower to change colors, made a leaf grow larger. Simple alterations that still required immense concentration. Then they moved to animals. Small ones at first, changing a frog's coloration, making a mouse slightly larger. Nothing permanent, nothing cruel, just practice in making living bodies change according to magical will. Elena excelled. Her understanding of theoretical principles combined with growing practical skills put her at the top of the class. Professor Caney noticed, pulled her aside after one particularly successful transformation. You have a talent for this, Blackthorn. More than talent. You have an instinctive understanding that takes most students years to develop. Why? Because I've been living with transformation magic for over a year. Because I can feel the spell that changed me every time I look in a mirror. Because I have to understand this or I'll be stuck like this forever. But Elena couldn't say any of that. So she just shrugged. It makes sense to me. The logic behind it. Caney studied her. There's something you're not telling me, but I won't push. Just know that if you ever need guidance, my door is open. Transformation magic can be dangerous when self-taught. Elena thanked her and escaped before the conversation could go further. She was getting close. She could feel it. Her magical power had grown enormously. Her understanding of transformation theory was approaching expert level. The only thing missing was the specific knowledge of her own curse. She needed to analyze the magic that had been worked on her. But to do that, she'd need help. Someone skilled enough to examine her without alerting them to what they were really looking at. Lyra found her in the library one evening, surrounded by books on magical analysis. You look stressed. More stressed than usual anyway. Elena rubbed her eyes. Just a lot of studying. Right. Studying. Not at all obsessively researching transformation curses like you've been doing for the past year and a half. Elena froze. Looked up. I don't... Oh, come on. I'm not an idiot, Elian. Or whatever your real name is. You've been researching curse-breaking methodologies for months. You practice transformation magic like your life depends on it. And sometimes when you think nobody's watching, you look at your hands like they belong to someone else. Lyra sat down across from her. You're cursed, aren't you? Transformed into something you didn't choose to be. There was no point denying it. Lyra had figured it out. The question was what she'd do with that information. Yes. Want to tell me about it? Not particularly. Fair enough. Do you need help breaking it? Elena looked at her friend, really looked at her. Lyra's expression was genuinely concerned, not curious in a gossipy way, actually worried. Why would you help me? Because you're my friend, because you're clearly suffering, and because breaking transformation curses is fascinating magic that I'd love to learn more about. Lyra grinned. Mostly the friend thing, though. Elena made a decision, took a chance, told Lyra a carefully edited version of the truth. Cursed by a mysterious magic user, transformed into a boy. Needs to achieve mastery of transformation magic to break it. Possibly. Lyra listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, her friend was quiet for a long moment. That's intense. Okay, I'm in. What do you need? I need to analyze the curse, figure out its structure, but I can't do it myself. I need someone who can examine me magically and tell me what they see. I can do that. I've been studying magical analysis. It's not my specialty, but I know the basics. When do you want to try? Now. They found an empty practice room. Elena sat in the center of a chalk circle while Lyra prepared the analysis spell. It was complex, requiring multiple components and precise wording. But Lyra managed it, her hands glowing with soft blue light as she cast. Okay, this might feel weird, she warned. Then she touched Elena's forehead, and the spell activated. Elena felt it immediately, like cold water washing through her entire being, like someone was examining every part of her at a fundamental level. Uncomfortable but not painful. Lyra's eyes widened. Oh, that's really complex magic. This isn't just a transformation, it's layered, multiple spells woven together. I can see. She paused. There's a condition for breaking it, but it's obscured, protected. I can't quite make it out. Can you see anything about the condition? Lyra concentrated harder. Something about achievement? Proving yourself? It's fuzzy. But the magic is definitely designed to break when you reach a certain threshold. You were right about needing to master transformation magic. I think that's the key. The spell ended. Lyra pulled back, breathing hard. That was intense. Whoever cursed you knew what they were doing. This is archmage-level magic, maybe beyond even that. How do I break it? By doing exactly what you're doing. Keep studying, keep improving. When you're good enough, the curse will recognize it and unravel itself. That's my best guess, anyway. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was more than Elena had known before. She had confirmation. Keep improving. Become a master. Break the curse. She could do that. 3rd year, 4th year. Time passed in a blur of studying and practicing and growing stronger. Elena's reputation at the academy grew. She became known as one of the top transformation specialists in her generation. Professors sought her out for difficult cases. Other students asked her for help with their transformation assignments. She was offered a position as a teaching assistant. Offered early graduation if she wanted it. She turned it down. She still had work to do. Still needed to get better. Still felt the curse wound around her magical core like chains she couldn't quite break. The final year at Thornhaven approached. Elena was 23 now, had been living as Elian for almost 5 years. Sometimes she barely remembered what it felt like to be Elena Hartwell, the girl who studied magical theory at a regular university, the girl whose biggest worry was finishing papers on time. That life felt like a dream, something that had happened to someone else. But she held on to it, held on to the memory of who she really was, because losing that would mean the curse had won. The thesis project. Every 5th-year student had to complete a major magical working to demonstrate their mastery. Most students chose safe, proven projects, replications of historical spells, practical applications of well-understood principles. Elena chose to break her curse. Professor Caney almost didn't allow it. Curse breaking is dangerous, Blackthorn, especially self-directed curse breaking. If something goes wrong, you could be permanently damaged. Or worse. I understand the risks, Professor. But this is my thesis. This is what I've been working toward for 5 years. Why is this so important to you? Elena met her eyes. Because I need to prove I can do it. Because it's the ultimate test of transformation mastery. Because if I can break a curse this complex, I can do anything. Half-truths and complete truths tangled together. Caney studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, you'll have my supervision. If at any point I think you're in danger, we stop immediately. Understood? Understood. The preparation took months. Elena had to fully map the curse's structure, identify every layer, every connection point, every failsafe built into it. Lyra helped, using her analysis skills to see what Elena couldn't see in herself. They discovered 7 distinct layers, each one more complex than the last. Each one designed to resist simple dispelling. Each one anchored to a different aspect of Elena's magical core. Breaking it would require unweaving all 7 layers in the correct sequence. One mistake could trigger the failsafes and make the curse permanent. No pressure. The day of the attempt arrived. Elena stood in the Academy's most secure practice chamber, surrounded by protective wards, with Professor Kane, Lyra, and 2 other professors standing by in case something went wrong. Remember, Caney said, if at any point you feel the curse fighting back too hard, stop. We can try again later. Your safety is more important than your thesis. Elena nodded, but she knew the truth. This was her only real chance. If she failed today, she'd probably never get another opportunity this good. She began. The spell required complete focus, total concentration. Elena had to hold the entire curse structure in her mind, while simultaneously casting 7 different dispelling variations in sequence. Each layer unraveled slowly. The first 3 came apart relatively easily. They were the outermost protections, designed to discourage casual attempts at breaking. But they weren't the real challenge. The 4th layer resisted. Elena pushed harder, channeling more power, forcing her will against the curse's will. The magic fought back, sending pain spiking through her entire body. She ignored it, kept going. The 4th layer broke. The 5th layer was even worse. It felt like trying to lift a mountain, like pushing against a force that had no intention of moving. Elena drew on every ounce of magical power she'd developed over the past 5 years, pulled energy from her core until she felt hollow. And finally, the 5th layer shattered. The 6th layer tried to be subtle. Instead of resisting directly, it tried to redirect Elena's efforts, make her think she was succeeding when she was actually just spinning her wheels. But Elena had prepared for this, had studied the curse until she knew it better than the original caster probably did. She saw through the deception and struck at the layer's actual structure. It collapsed like paper in fire. 1 layer left. The 7th and final layer was different from all the others. It wasn't a protection or a resistance. It was a test. Elena could feel it examining her, measuring her magical capability, judging whether she'd achieved the threshold required to break the curse. She held her breath. Had she done enough? Was she strong enough? The curse decided. The 7th layer began to dissolve, not because Elena was forcing it, but because it recognized her achievement, acknowledged her mastery. The transformation happened slowly. Elena felt her body shifting, changing, returning to its original form. It didn't hurt. Actually felt like relief, like finally taking off clothes that had never quite fit right. Her frame shrank. Her features softened. Her proportions rearranged themselves back to what they'd been 5 years ago. When it was over, Elena opened eyes that saw from a slightly lower angle and looked down at hands that were finally, blessedly, her own again. Professor Caney stepped forward. Blackthorn, are you all right? Elena looked up. realized Caney and the others were seeing her true form for the first time, seeing Elena instead of Elian. "I'm more than all right," she said, her voice higher than it had been, sounding strange in her own ears after years of speaking in a lower register. "I'm free." The examination that followed was thorough. The professors checked for any lingering curse effects, any damage from the breaking process, any instability in her magical core. They found nothing. The curse was completely gone. Elena was herself again. Or was she? She looked in a mirror later that night and saw a face she hadn't seen in 5 years. A face that looked younger than she felt. Because she'd changed in more than just physical ways. She'd grown stronger, more confident, more capable than Elena Hartwell had ever been. Elian Blackthorn had been a disguise, a fake identity created out of desperation. But the person Elena had become while wearing that face? That wasn't fake. She'd earned every bit of magical skill, every piece of knowledge, every relationship she'd built, and she wasn't going to throw that away just because she had her original body back. The scandal when the truth came out was enormous. A student had attended Thornhaven under a false identity for 5 years. The academy had been deceived. Students felt betrayed. Professors demanded answers. Headmistress Sylvain summoned Elena to her office for the 2nd time. The conversation was tense. "You lied to us," Sylvain said flatly. "You created a false identity, provided fake credentials, attended this academy under false pretenses. That violates numerous regulations." "I know, Headmistress." "And yet you don't seem particularly sorry." Elena considered that. "I'm sorry for the deception. I'm not sorry for coming here. I needed to learn transformation magic. I needed to break the curse. Thornhaven was my only option. If I'd revealed the truth at the start, would you have admitted me?" Sylvain was quiet for a moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "Probably not. We have rules for a reason. But occasionally those rules fail to account for exceptional circumstances." She leaned forward. "Your thesis work was remarkable. Genuinely groundbreaking. You've advanced the field of transformation curse-breaking by years. Your professors all say you're one of the most talented transformation specialists they've taught. So I find myself in an interesting position. Technically, I should expel you and invalidate all your work. Realistically, that would be a waste of genuine talent and would punish you for being desperate enough to try something audacious." "What are you going to do?" "Graduate you. With honors. On the condition that you immediately enroll in our master's program and continue your research. We'll provide a full scholarship and a stipend. You'll work as a teaching assistant in transformation courses. And you'll publish your thesis work under your real name." Elena stared. "You're not expelling me?" "I'm making you useful to the academy. Consider it penance for your deception. You'll spend the next 2 years teaching others what you've learned, giving back to the institution you manipulated. Fair?" "More than fair, Headmistress. Thank you." Elena left the office feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd done it. Actually done it. Broken the curse. Kept her education. Even earned some measure of redemption. Her friends had mixed reactions. Felix was shocked, but ultimately supportive. "I can't believe you're a girl. This explains so many things, like why you never joined us for the public bath. I thought you were just really modest." Lyra just grinned. Called it. "I knew there was something going on. Though I thought you might be a runaway noble or something, not literally cursed. This is so much better." "Better how?" "Because it's an amazing story. Also because you just proved that desperate people can accomplish incredible things if they're willing to work hard enough. That's inspiring." Marcus from her old university found her eventually. He'd been searching for Elena Hartwell for years, never giving up hope. When he heard about the scandal at Thornhaven, he made the connection. Their reunion was tearful and complicated. "You disappeared," he said. "For 5 years. We thought you were dead, or kidnapped, or worse. And all this time you were here studying magic under a fake name." Elena explained everything. The street vendor, the transformation, the desperate plan, the years of work. Marcus listened, his expression cycling through shock, anger, understanding, and finally acceptance. "You should have told someone, should have asked for help. Who would have believed me? Who could have helped? I would have tried. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I put you through that." They reconciled slowly, rebuilt their friendship. It took time. Trust had been broken, but they worked through it. The master's program was different from undergraduate work, more research-focused, more independent study. Elena, now going by her real name again, threw herself into transformation theory with renewed passion. She published papers on curse-breaking methodologies, developed new techniques for analyzing complex transformations, taught classes where she shared everything she'd learned. Students loved her. She had a reputation for being demanding but fair, for understanding struggle because she'd experienced it herself, for never giving up on students who were willing to work hard. 2 years passed quickly. Elena graduated with her master's degree, was immediately offered a position as a junior professor at Thornhaven. She accepted. Her first official act as Professor Hartwell was to establish a scholarship fund for late-blooming magical talent, for students like her who discovered their abilities later than usual, for people who needed a second chance. Lyra stayed in touch, went on to become a magical analyst working for the kingdom's security forces. Felix opened a shop selling magical components, did well enough to support himself comfortably. Life settled into a new normal. Teaching, research, occasionally taking on curse-breaking cases for people who needed help. Elena never forgot what it felt like to be desperate, to be trapped, to need answers that seemed impossible to find. So she made herself available, made sure others had the help she'd lacked. Years later, she received a letter from an anonymous sender. Inside was a note written in elegant script and a small glass vial filled with shimmering silver liquid. The note read simply, "You passed the test. Congratulations on becoming everything you were meant to be. The potion is yours to study or destroy as you wish. Use the knowledge wisely." Elena stared at the vial for a long time. This was it. The potion that had changed her life, the transformation curse that had driven her to achieve things she'd never imagined possible. She should destroy it. Should make sure it could never be used on anyone else. But instead, she locked it away in a secure vault. Because someday, maybe, someone else would need it. Someone else would be desperate enough for change that they'd be willing to risk everything. And when that time came, Elena would be there to guide them, to help them through what she'd experienced, to make sure they didn't have to face it alone. She'd been transformed against her will, forced to become someone she didn't choose. But in the process, she'd discovered strength she didn't know she had, developed abilities she'd never expected to possess, became more than she'd ever thought possible. The curse had been a nightmare, but it had also been a gift. And Elena had learned that sometimes the hardest challenges lead to the greatest growth. That desperation can fuel achievement. That being forced outside your comfort zone can reveal capabilities you never knew existed. She looked at her reflection one last time. Not the girl who studied magical theory at a small university. Not the boy who attended Thornhaven under a false name, but someone new. Someone who'd been forged in the fire of impossible challenges and came out stronger. Professor Elena Hartwell, Master of Transformation Magic. Former curse victim, current professor, someone who'd taken an impossible situation and turned it into an extraordinary life. And in the end, that was worth everything she'd been through, every struggle, every challenge, Every moment of desperation and doubt. Because she'd not only survived, she'd thrived. The street vendor who'd cursed her had been right about one thing. Elena had become everything she was meant to be. She'd just taken a really unusual path to get there. If you enjoyed this story of magical transformation and determination, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible Manhwa recaps. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of Elena's journey from desperate university student to master mage. And if you want to see more stories about magic academies, cursed transformations, or characters who refuse to give up no matter the odds, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.